Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. This is Mike from DynamicPoint. We will get started here in about 1 minute. We'll give a few minutes for everyone to join. Today, we'll be looking at using Power Apps in Office 365 to automate employee expense management. So again, thank you, everyone, and we'll give it 1 more minute. All right, I'm showing 1 after the top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. Again, thank you everyone for taking a half an hour of your day today to talk about using Power Apps in Office 365. Today we'll be covering some of the various tools, tips, tricks, things like that that you could use to help manage employee expenses, capture receipts, things like that. So hopefully you'll learn something today. Just a bit of housekeeping. I will do my best to look at the questions as we're going through it. So if you have anything, please go ahead and put it in there. And then when I pause, I'll do my best to try to answer any questions as we're going through it. Again, today we should probably finish just under a half an hour. I'll do my best to keep it moving along. We have a lot to cover. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Introduction of myself. My name is Mike. I head up business development for DynamicPoint. So just a quick introduction of who we are. DynamicPoint, our sort of claim to fame, our niche reason for existing is that we create apps on top of the Office 365 framework. So we have several apps that we'll discuss in a little bit, but basically our approach is to create all of these products within Office 365. For those of you who are sort of new to that concept, the best analogy that I've been able to come up with over the years is it's very similar to sort of installing apps on a mobile phone. When you install an app on a mobile phone, it asks you all these questions, which we probably don't read anymore. We just say yes to, but can I use your camera? Can I use your location? You know, all these things that are basically the application using the platform. In that case, you know, an iPhone or an Android device, but Microsoft Office 365 provides this whole ecosystem for app development as well. And that's exactly what we do. We've been around, believe it or not, before Office 365. We were founded back in 2009. So we used to create products on SharePoint server. And then about 6 or 7 years ago now, we began migrating all of our products to the Office 365 framework. So that's a little bit of history on us. As far as our product lineup, we have an employee, customer, and vendor portal application. It basically allows sharing of data on a SharePoint extranet or intranet. We have a AP automation product, and then we have an employee expense. Today is not so much of a focus on our products, it's just more of a focus on the surrounding technology. We will go into a little bit of how expense management ties into what we're sharing today. But today is more just looking at the Office 365 features and functions as opposed to focusing solely on what it is that we're offering. But we'll cover it a little bit, but not just towards the end. Okay, so let's talk about capturing expense receipts. So, you know, generally when we talk about employee expense management, the sort of first thing that comes to mind is I'm going to incur expenses and I need to capture those receipts. So I'm out to dinner, I'm, you know, taking some type of transportation, like I guess a cab or something. I need to get a receipt. Maybe it's paper, maybe it's electronic, and I need to capture those, right? So with this Office 365 framework, we have a plethora of ways to capture expenses and receipts. And we're gonna go through a lot today. And you know, what I tell people, it's not so much, you know, choices are good, obviously, but from a rollout perspective and what works best for your company, sometimes just picking one that's the most applicable is sort of the best approach, right? Because if you offer too many, then there may be confusion. It's sort of the, Costco approach that you should really only have one or two options, because that's all that we could really handle from a mind capacity and being able to make a decision. So I'm going to show you a lot just for the sake of today. But really what I would suggest is that you sort of focus on the ones that work for your people within your company, right? If they're mostly in front of a desktop, then focus on that. If they're mostly in the field, then focus on that. So simplify it and don't give too many choices, or else it gets a little confusing. So the ones we're going to go through today is just a simple mobile upload, right? And what this is I'm out and about, I want to capture a receipt. I don't want to have the paper, or stick it in my pocket, and I just want to capture it. So what we're going to use here is a mobile upload app, specifically OneDrive, to capture that receipt. Now, this other option, the logo here is the Power App logo, and I'm going to show an option there. It's going to be a little bit more involved, and what this approach gives me is the ability to not only capture the receipt, of course, but maybe I want to, tag a job or an expense type, or specify a vendor, or put in a justification. In other words, in addition to just uploading it in a simple fashion, I want to capture some more information. For those of you who are more Teams fans, you could do all this, of course, from your desktop using Teams. Teams also has, a mobile app. Honestly, if you're using mobile, I would suggest Power Apps over Teams, just because it's a little bit more simple to navigate. But if you are using a desktop, then you can do it Teams, or you can most certainly do it directly from a browser if you're in front of a desktop. So these two options are sort of for the road warrior types, those on the go, and then these two options are more if you're in front of a computer or a laptop. So those are the ones we're going to go through today. And let's start getting to it. So let's first just do the simple mobile upload. And I will get out of here and bring over my phone so we could all see it here. Everyone keep your fingers crossed that we don't get any embarrassing text or anything like that. Okay, so I have a DynamicPoint folder here, and I have the OneDrive app. The OneDrive app is free on the App Store. Microsoft publishes it. It comes, basically with Office 365, so it's not costing you anything extra. But what it does provide is the ability to integrate with SharePoint libraries, right? Amongst other things, right? Obviously, I could save these things in OneDrive and stuff like that, but what I'm going to show is just the ability to use this app to capture a receipt. So I have a simple site here for our product name, EasyEXP365, and I have a mobile expense receipt library. And I'm going to go ahead and use this fancy app to take a picture of a receipt. So let me go ahead and grab one sitting on my desk here and take a picture. So you can see this app is smarter than, I guess, the average camera, if you will, right? You can see it's outlining my document here. I could play with these borders, but it's going to get rid of my desk for me, right? So now I have the receipt, and it's going to be saved again to this library. So again, it's confirming which library it's going to. As you see, I do have the ability to specify some properties here that I've created, such as the vendor name or selecting a category and things like that. So I can interact with this before I choose to upload it, or I could just go ahead and upload it. I'm just going to go ahead and upload it for now and put it in that library. So uploading and done, right? So what did that do? Basically, if I were to go to SharePoint, so let's go ahead and open this up and bring it over so you can see it. Get rid of my phone for a second. And I have mobile expense receipts here. I would expect to see a few seconds ago that scan added. Ta-da, right? So as you can see, it's been captured, it's been associated to my user, right? So if nothing else, right, this is obviously a simple process. We're gonna, of course, get more fancy with this, but if nothing else, I'm now able to capture this and save it electronically, right? So I have the receipt, it's now saved in SharePoint, it's associated to my name, And we're going to use this a little bit later to capture more detail. In fact, you could see here on the one that I just submitted a little bit earlier that it populated data. So now that I have it in a library, I could do much more sophisticated things like kick off OCR, but we're going to hold off on that for a little bit and just focus on the various upload methods. So as you can see, that one was really simple. I just took a picture, captured it. I could throw away the receipt now. It's now in a library. It's now associated to my name. You know, if everyone was saving to this library, I would only see the ones associated to me. In other words, I could establish permissions on this. In a very basic standpoint, I now have a simple electronic repository. So let's go ahead and go back to the mobile. And let's work our way up in sophistication. So now let's say, hey, that was great, right? I was obviously able to capture it, but in addition to capturing it, maybe I want to do something a little bit more sophisticated, right? Maybe I want to code it to a job, pick an expense category, do things like that. So for that, I actually have a Power App. I have a couple to show you, again, depending on sort of what fits your process better here. So I'm going to go into my first one here, of which we've just titled Easy EXP 365. Again, this is nothing more than a Power App. And this one, you can see it's a little bit more sophisticated than just adding a picture, right? I have expense items, I have mileage items, I have credit card items, etc. So now I could start capturing additional types of expenses than just a simple submission of a receipt. So let's go ahead and add a new one. And we'll type in a vendor, say we went out to dinner. I don't know, we'll say we went out for a steak dinner or something. We'll do meals, some costs associated to it, description, and then again, the ability to attach a file, of which I happen to have a receipt sitting right here. So we'll go ahead and take a picture of that. And save it. So, okay, expense item created successfully. It should be in my list here. There's my meals, $100 submitted, etc. Right? So now I have all these items that are captured on my mobile app, but these are ultimately going to a library as well. And if we wanted to go see that, let's go ahead and go to expense items. So this is yet just another SharePoint site. And you can see here's all of the expenses, including the ones I've just uploaded, but here they all are, right? So that was when I just coded the meals, etc. So again, I have it captured. If I were to go into this, I would be able to see the receipt is attached to it. In fact, you can see here there's an attachment, and that is the receipt that I just uploaded. So if we want to go check that out, ta-da, there it is, right? Okay, so that method versus the previous one, you know, I'm able to capture a little bit more details, right? That's the big quote unquote difference there, is in addition to just submitting a picture, I'm now interfacing with an application and I could start picking things, right? And you know, I could do other things. I could put in mileage, right? So if I want to go ahead and put an auto mileage item in, we have this. This does a little bit fanciness in that it's using a map integration to calculate miles. So let's just say we were going to go to Disneyland or something, and if I tab out of this, you can see it actually populated the distance there. And what that is interfacing with is Bing Maps, which is integrated with Power Apps, and it's putting in those two locations and then it's simply returning the distance for me. And then last but not least, credit card items. Credit card items, they're actually already there for me. These came in via a feed. And the feed is coming from my banking institution. It is a live feed, of course. Well, I say live, it's refreshed daily. And what this is giving me an ability to do is code these. So now I have my credit card items coming in and I could assign categories and things like that. Of course, and add attachments if I want to. So again, a little bit different interface. In fact, in these cases, I've added a submit button. I have a little bit more going on here as far as like workflow, and this is actually integrating these with our application too, which I'll show you in a second. So that was a pretty detailed app, if you will. Let's go look at one more. And this other one that we created was namely for an organization we work with where, you know, in today's day and age, they really only cared about a couple things, and that was mostly mileage. People were traveling around and they wanted to submit mileage, and occasionally people had out-of-pocket expenses. So they weren't so concerned about credit card or corporate credit card or anything like that, and they just wanted a real simple experience for users to track mileage. And then ideally, they didn't want them putting in mileage, they wanted it to calculate it for them. So here I have a mileage and expense, another just Power App. And as you can see, this one's really simple, right? I have a depart button, I have a arrive button, and then I have a simple big button down here for logging a new expense. And this works just as sort of it looks, right? If I hit the depart button, it's going to initiate a integration with the GPS on the phone and track my mileage. And this one is hard for me to demo. I'd have to go running around my house or something for it to track mileage, but it'll show, it'll just have a 0 items. But when now I could drive to wherever I'm going, and then when I get to my destination, of course, I'm just gonna hit the arrive button. The arrive button is gonna have a little bit of pause because it's gonna tell me the outcome of how far I went, right? And then it's capturing all types of metadata too, such as where I started from, and then the date of today, etc. So you can see here, you've successfully completed the distance, 0 miles. Again, I'm sitting at a desk, so I'm not really traveling anywhere. But if I were to go look at this, as far as what that just did, you can see here I have all kinds of items. I'm gonna go down to the bottom one, which represents today. And I happen to be working at home, and this is my home address and the start address and the end address, and then the total miles between the two, unfortunately 0. But if I did travel, of course, it would show the difference here too, right? So these are actually ones with me just sort of walking around my neighborhood or house. And as you can see, it's very sensitive as far as what it's able to track from a mileage perspective. So, and again, in this use case, the customer also had people occasionally, you know, entering things for stuff they bought around the house, maybe office supplies or ink or whatever else. So you could go ahead and put in Office Depot, pick a category, again, a cost associated to it, as well as attach a receipt. Again, just saving itself to a SharePoint list. A different list in this case, right? So if I go to expense items, I would expect to see a new item added there. Okay, so hopefully that's all making sense, right? Just different ways of capturing it, again, depending on my business process and what my users or employees, I should say, are incurring in the world of expenses. So let's go ahead and open up PowerPoint once again and move forward. And let's talk about how we could start pulling in OCR to this, right? So depending on how I'm capturing these, sort of doesn't matter that much, because as you notice, they're all going to either a document library or a list in SharePoint. And the reason I'm saving it in SharePoint is actually a couple reasons. One is because if you have Office 365, you know, you get at least a gig of storage, which is tremendous. So it's a free option. It has a great user interface. You know, managers could go in there, accounts payable could go in there and see what's uploaded, etc. If you wanted to save it somewhere else, such as the Dataverse or into, you know, OneDrive or whatever, you most certainly could, right? Like I just think a SharePoint library is a native, easy sort of natural place to store all these receipts. But now that I have them, I could begin pulling in a little bit more logic. And one of the types of logics I could pull in is OCR. And you know, Microsoft has their OCR by the name of AI. There's most certainly legacy on-premise solutions. There's some available in the Microsoft App Store. There's third-party ones. There's all kinds of OCR tools that I could bring into this picture to perform logic on those receipts such that I could extract data from them. So I have employees uploading them. Maybe I don't want them to put the amount. Maybe I don't want them to categorize these. I want to use the results of something intelligent like OCR to extrapolate that data. And as you can see, the sort of backbone for us integrating with these OCR options, this is the Power Automate logo. We're going to use Power Automate to pass those over to an OCR tool, and that OCR tool is going to give us results. So let's go ahead and look at that. So let's go ahead and discard. And let's go back to my, let's get out of this guy and go to the ones I initially scanned. So the ones I initially uploaded, as you can see here, it now has all kinds of data populated, right? It has a total, it's been categorized, it's captured the vendor, etc. And if you notice when I first uploaded that data wasn't there. In fact, I could go ahead and do a new one from Teams because I didn't mention, the ability to upload, of course, these directly from Teams. So here's my expense receipt library. I'm going to go ahead and upload. And let me go ahead and pick a receipt here. Sure, we'll pick a new one. And that put it, of course, right in that library. So if I go back to that library and do a quick refresh, oops, I didn't have to, there it is, right? So again, in this case, you could see some of those columns are blank. And the OCR process will kick off. It takes about a minute or two, so we don't have to sit here and wait for it to happen. But when it does, it's going to get the results of those, the OCR process, and populate these columns. So let's look at how that's done. And I have Power Automate open. And I have a receipt upload here. And this is a pretty simple workflow. So I say when a new file is created, right? Obviously that's being uploaded to that library. I get the file content out of that. I extrapolate some data. I encode the attachment, and then I submit it using a web call to, this is a cloud-based OCR tool that we're very fond of. It's from a company by the name of Verify. And what it's going to do is pass this to this cloud-based tool and then get the results of it. And then from the results of that, it's going to update, of course, the properties right back in SharePoint, right? So pretty simple workflow. In fact, I've probably talked maybe long enough for it to go ahead and work. So ta-da, I'll refresh my screen, and now you can see here's all of the data that it's capturing, again, from that upload process. And if you want to experiment with this, you could do it from our website. We actually have a little test feature. So if you go to expense management, all the way at the very bottom, there is a Q&A section. And one of those options is, how well does OCR work, right? And this little tool here, if you want to go ahead and try it, will give you the ability to upload a receipt. So let's go ahead and grab one really quick. Use my Great Outdoors, go ahead and copy that over. And then it'll take just a brief moment, and then you'll see what the results of OCR, excuse me, the results of OCR are. So you can see here it captured all the various line items, the vendor. It's tried to categorize the vendor. It's captured payment type, invoice number, and the data associated to it. And then if you look at the other tab here, it's actually all of the data that's available to me. So of all of this data, here's all the data that I could return to that library. So what does that give me, right? And like I said, moving forward, all of this data is not only being quote unquote captured, but I'm also using something very intelligent on it, aka OCR, to extrapolate some data fields. So maybe I don't want my employees to have to enter the amount, or maybe I want them to enter the amount, but I want it to be verified by OCR such there's a reconciliation between what they put and what OCR recognized. And now that I have, all this data being captured and the results of it, what we do from our perspective is we ingest all this information and essentially build an expense report. And what our product is doing is taking this data, right? So if we were to talk about, what do I do with all this information? Just capturing it, of course, is, important. But how do I process this? What do I want to do with it? How do I want to integrate it to an ERP system, et cetera? And that's what we've done from our product perspective, right? Is we've talked about this invoice receipt and capturing all these details from the various methods and them going into a library. We performed OCR on it. And then what our app does is sort of handle this processing and the workflow integration and ultimately the integration with the ERP, and that we're reflecting these expenses or potentially paying the employees if you're not paying them through a payroll process. You don't have to, of course, you could pay them through payroll and then just reflect those expenses in the ERP. But let's go ahead and look at what we've been creating, right? So this creates this report that's basically taking the line items, regardless of how they came in, whether they were a picture or came in via, the Power App or through Teams. All of them went to the same location, and these are being coded to, financial aspects within the accounting system, whether they be cost centers or expense types, et cetera, as well as capturing all this documentation. And a user could come in here and look at this and submit it, or they could actually just be auto-submitted. But through the nature of them being submitted, we are then going to, of course, initiate a workflow and then route them for approval. And then upon approval, we will integrate this outcome with the ERP product on whatever needs to be reflected in the financial system. So that's basically taking this concept of capturing it and then moving all the way through the process. And that is, like I said, today was more to look at the various ways you could use Power Apps. And of course, all of those can be used independently or with our product. It's up to you. But what this did is this initiated a workflow on it. You can see now it's going to go to a manager for review and approval. They have a link here that they could click on this expense report and dive down into it. These are using Power Automate approval tasks. So if I would prefer to do this from Teams, there's an approval within Teams as well. So if I go to activity, I should probably see it there. Yep, so there's my approval. So I can approve those within Teams too. And then upon this approval, like I said, it's going to call the underlying accounting system and create transactions. So that's what our app adds to the mix. It's sort of the glue that keeps that all together, if you will, and takes those various input methods and capture methods and pulls them into the financial system of record. So looking at my watch, I am right about at time. So let's go ahead and wrap it up and tell you thank you so much for joining. I appreciate everyone's time. If you have any questions for me, here's my email, mmarson@dynamicpoint.com. This will be recorded and sent out to everyone. If anyone is interested in the Power Apps that I showed you today, I'm happy to share them. I could send you downloads to them and whatever else. It's no big deal. Just please give us an email and I'm happy to share a link. Thank you all. Have a great day, and I appreciate everyone's time.